Got it. I'm going to call the October 3rd meeting of the Zoning Bylaw Committee to order. Start with a roll call attendance in alphabetical order. Clark.
Here.
Tom Callahan here.
David Farag here.
Who's also with us are Cassandra Thayer and Lauren Lynn from our planning staff. Seems like we have a few other guests here tonight. Good. We'll start with the discussion of the upcoming forum, which is 2 weeks from tonight, is the first one. We'll discuss the diagnostic at the end. So I'll just take that one out of order. So the first item on the agenda, I assume we're going to hear from Justin Schreier about all the public outreach efforts that are being made with regard to the proposed changes to the zoning bylaws. So Justin, if you want to explain what you've got in store for us, go right ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful. So over the last couple of weeks, actually over the last several weeks, we've done a heck of a lot of public outreach. I do have a list if anybody is interested of what we've done so far. I won't go over all of it tonight because there's a fair amount of it. But what I really wanted to talk about tonight is I really wanted to hopefully get a sense of who we can use over the next week and a half, over the next 2 weeks, to hopefully connect you all with some local news stations, some local media, as well as shoot some more videos that we can really blast out to our social media. I can tell you in terms of our communications plan, everything is actually going to plan, which is good. This week, hopefully getting a final approval for postcards that will have a QR code on them. It will also have a little explanation of several of the public outreach, or excuse me, several of the public events that are coming up. Obviously, the first one is on October 17th, and that will actually be sent out to all 3,300 households here in Cohasset. But what I'd really like to do tonight is really get a feel from you all about who is interested and who is comfortable speaking to some local media, who would like to speak with several of you. So I guess I'd like to start there.
Well, when you say several, I'm the only concern I have about several is that we all have a consistent message. That
is my concern as well. That is my concern as well. I want to make sure that we're all staying on the same page and that we do have a consistent message. We shot a video with Lauren Lind already. We shot a quick video with Clark last week. And so really? What I'd like to do is get some folks connected with some local reporters. They'd really just like to speak a little bit about what citizens can expect at this October 17th meeting, and a little bit about what the Zoning Bylaw Committee does.
Well,
I'd be happy to help, but I'm not sure about what message.
Yeah, I mean,
the video I shot was just that we're having an upcoming forum and where it is, when it is, and what it's covering generally. So in terms of the message, it was, the intent was just to educate the public in some form other than written or emails.
So if I could paraphrase, it sounds like it's going to be more the process as opposed to the content or the substance. I mean,
well, we'd like to obviously provide a little bit of content and a little bit of substance, but we want to obviously keep it. We obviously don't want to sway one way or the other way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as chair, I think I will need to do it, and I don't have a problem doing this, but I think that the first one on substance, I would rather do after the first forum, not before it.
Well, it's
Because-
an introductory. It's just to introduce the forum.
Well, that can be fine. That's fine. We can do that. But apparently 2 interviews have already been done. I wasn't aware of that, but
Once we have the forum in place,
But
there'll
after
be
the-
content that can be used
yeah,
afterwards. I mean, there'll be an hour and a half of content that
I
is
think,
created.
I think after the forum, we want to do something substantive about what happened at the forum, what kind of feedback we got, what kind of concerns were expressed, which we can't predict at this point. We know what we're going to say, but we don't know what we're going to hear back. So I'll be available for that after the first forum, but and whoever else, and then, the third forum, Clark, you're going to be a featured speaker. Woody, you're a featured speaker at the second forum, and some part of the first forum as well. So, I think certainly when those come up, you two should be ready to do those kinds of more in-depth interviews at that time. So,
Well, so I'm going to
I mean,
jump in on this
I-
because I do think that we should do some heavy promotion for this first meeting. I really want to get folks involved here, and I really want to make sure that we have some consistent messaging and that we explain to folks this is
Yeah.
what's going to be happening on October 17th. These are the topics that we're going to hit on. Why does this matter to you? Why does this matter to the community? Why should you show up?
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Just if I sound a tad reluctant, it's because this is new. I don't
That's
think
okay.
I don't think any of us, I think at different times WATD has interviewed people after town meeting, or at town meeting. But this is, a media blitz isn't something we're all used to on these town boards. So
Mr. Chairman, I think you have somebody with their hand up too, with a question.
yes, I see that. I'll get to it in a second. So that's fine, but just understand it's all kind of new to us too at the same time. But
No, absolutely,
I
absolutely.
mean, I appreciate what you've been doing so far to get the word out. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, flyers were being handed out at the farmers market. I mean, I was kind of surprised, and Lauren and Cassandra were doing their duty at the farmers market. I thought that was amazing to see something like that. So, and I hope we will get a good turnout. So
I think it's
Uh,
great to try to use whatever vehicles are available for
Yeah.
getting the word out. And certainly when we were working on the master plan, even our preliminary meetings, the video team made a video and then edited it and then put it up on the cable TV. Not that anybody ever watches that. It's just that it was available.
Mhm.
Some people
uh,
watch it.
Right.
Yeah,
And right. Some people do watch it, but
We'll see.
not
And
live. But through the 143 TV, you can go through the old video so that there's still content that's available now from years ago from that. But in terms of promoting this upcoming forum and the others, I think anything that works and whatever works the best, use that as much as possible.
Well, this first
So
one will
I'd be
be,
happy to shoot another video or be interviewed. I'll just make myself available whenever that is good, and Tom can do it too.
yeah,
That's
I just
fine.
need a heads up so I can dress nicely.
Man,
But no,
I gotta
anything
comb my
that
hair.
this,
Here's my
no,
hair.
this
That's
first
good.
forum is, this first
good enough.
forum is going to be, this first forum is going to be a test for a lot of things to see what works and what doesn't. So, I'm looking forward to any kind of things. It's just new to us, obviously.
Look, are we primarily gathering ideas from people or putting on the solutions on the table?
Well, all right, let me see, let me just get Jean's thought before we get into the substance of how the forum's going to look. Jean?
Hey, everyone. I confess maybe I'm a little bit
You-
behind Justin's question in terms of the messaging because, as you know, I live next to the village. I know a bunch of people who live near the harbor. And the question is, if we want people to be interested in attending, like, what are the top 3 things that we want to put out there I just want to make sure that if I'm emailing people or if I'm posting on Facebook or we want others to, is it, for example, like, are you concerned about the size of the buildings? Do you want more parking? Do you want more economic development in certain areas? Like, are there 3 top line messages that we want to draw people into the forum with? Or is the forum more going to be, what would you like to see in the village that exist, like more of or less of? This maybe goes to Woody's point of, are we sort of putting out straw man solutions or potential solutions and inviting feedback? Are we just generally opening the door?
All right, well, but both of you haven't been to our last couple of meetings, so let me go over this again on what we're going to be doing. For the committee members, you've seen our schedule. You probably have a copy of it in front of you that has some bullet points of what we're going to be doing at the forum. So the first forum, Lauren is going to open up the discussion and just introduce what the forums are for, the whole, it's sort of a general whole process kind of thing. Then I'm going to be the lead speaker for the 2 topics, and we're doing Harbor and Village in one night, and there's going to be a short break between them, although a lot of their issues overlap, particularly something like parking. But what we're going to, for those 2 in particular, we're going to throw out what the working group has been discussing about these 2 areas for the last 2 years. And frankly, we've talked more about changes in the harbor than we have in the village. Woody can correct me, he was on the working group with me, that I don't think there was a giant consensus that there's anything wrong with the village bylaw as it's written. It's just that only until recently has it been extensively used for some new projects. So in the harbor, in particular, we have discussed consolidation of the districts to basically take the waterfront business, downtown business, and the overlay into a single, whether we call it waterfront business or a harbor district, a single district of all the waterfront properties, with the exception of the Oaks estate would probably be left residential. We want to talk about then the uses that go along with that. All the uses in the harbor currently done by special permit through the zoning board. All the uses in the village are done by special permit through the planning board. Nobody's proposing a change to that. And in the harbor, there's not a radical proposal. We never discussed really changes in uses, except that if we eliminate the overlay district, which we really don't need, there's one property that's still within that district that has not been redeveloped, but most of it is, it's served its purpose. But what the overlay district brought to the harbor was mixed use. And the question will be, do we want to continue to extend the possibility of mixed use to the rest of the harbor? And as a practical matter, that would be the existing commercial property on the land side of Elm Street that's already in the overlay. It would be the Atlantica site. It would be the Lobster Pound site. It would be the non-town owned portions of the end of Parker Ave. Do we want to do that? So we're going to throw that open. And then the other issue that we've always talked about with the working group is the height. We have a uniform 35-foot height limit around the town. When applied to the harbor, it has to be superimposed on top of the base flood elevation. That base flood elevation is very high at Atlantica, which is why Atlantica is not being torn down and rebuilt, because they'd have to meet that. They'd have to put a building way up in the air. But it is being done at the hotel site, and it's going to, the elevation was 8. So the 35 feet started at elevation 8 and then went up. So
So basically you're saying the top of that project is 8 feet higher than any other allowed building in
It's
town.
it's at least 8 feet higher. And again, it's always been my personal view that the town really doesn't know what's coming yet because it was all presented during COVID and by Zoom. And I think it's going to the added height plus the fact that the building is moving closer to the sidewalk because of the public benefit trade-off we're getting in the back is going to be, I think it's going to be a revelation to some people when it gets built. So those are the issues that the working group have been doing. And the presentation that I'm envisioning for myself on this is very short and sweet because there really is, we're not here like a town meeting to oppose a solution and say yay or nay. And then open it up. And I guess Lauren, Cassandra, do we have a facilitator? We're
Yes,
getting a
so
third
also
party
we do have a facilitator. We spoke with them today. I just want to share my screen also to give a little bit more of like context to sort of how we're thinking that the content will go. We will have a third party moderator from MAPC. We spoke, his name is Christian Brandt, is our number one like dedicated person there who will be with us for all 3 of the forums and the planning processes. We will, when it comes for particularly the housing and then the climate and resiliency pieces, they plan to pull in like an expert in that subject matter for those as well. But we, like I said, we'll have Christian as a primary point person throughout, and we'll be introducing him shortly. But then, so this is really sort of what working document that we've been framing what each would look like. We plan to have Tom, and we haven't identified yet the key person to plug into this topic, but that way it's like sort of a panel of speakers, and then we would have a moderated Q&A, take questions as they were. And I think it also, we have to plan it to be a little bit flexible because you don't know how much attendance you might get or how many questions. So we may also have like a list of pre-facilitated questions, just to get conversations going, things like that. We would take a break and then discuss the village in a similar fashion. One of the things I thought might be helpful for the public to understand as an educational component is what design guidelines are, what they mean, and sort of what the difference is between that and zoning, just so that we can give some examples of what it means now, how you apply it today, and what you could change for the future. And again, the way we've been framing all of these forums and the topics is that we want to have people have an opportunity to think about and like react to concepts and ask questions about them before we're in a public meeting leading into town meeting where we're asking them to take a vote on language.
Yeah, and the intent, Gene, is much more of the public speaking than the town board members speaking. Again, we're going to highlight some of the things we've discussed within the working group in this committee over the last 2 years, but really open up the floor. This is what we're here for, is to get feedback from the community. And again, on the village specifically, again, the working group, I don't think we really ever started to focus on the village. We talked more about the harbor than we did the village, but nobody has jumped out with any proposed changes. But yet we know the community, based on their initial reactions to the ongoing projects down there, has a lot of opinions about what should be happening with the village. So, that's in particular is going to be something where we're throwing the floor open to comments and feedback.
I also think we ought to be careful. I mean, I haven't been on the working group for over half a year, but yes, in the harbor, we have discussed things, but we came to virtually no agreement or consensus on any
Correct.
of it. So this is a very fluid. We can't even sort of posit that height seems too high. Height was discussed. But
Right.
There is no, or at least there wasn't 6 months ago. I don't know the new group.
No, it hasn't gone any further because, on substance, we've been, getting this committee reconstituted. We've been in substantive limbo for the last 6
So
months.
I see us teeing up issues.
Tom has just
as
raised
opposed to-
height as an issue, not that we've had a discussion on in
Right, it's going to-
deliberations on whether the height definition should be changed for the harbor or anywhere else.
Yeah, it would be the height measurement about whether it should be 35 feet over base flood, which is now, or something less like 25 or 28 or something in that range. But Woody's correct. We didn't get to a consensus that we should change it, but we did discuss it as an issue, and soon people will see what current conditions are going to yield. And again, there's practical limitations. For example, the Atlantica site is a great example. They didn't want to go up because they'd be up 14 feet in the air before they'd have an occupiable floor. So there are some practical things in our favor where maybe we don't have to do anything about it. But again, it's to throw the concepts out of there, and then I think the biggest discussion is going to be over uses, frankly, and I gather from our town social media, there's some strong opinions both ways about condos on the harbor, and we'll see what people think. But all right, so that's the game plan. And with the facilitator, we don't have to get into who's picking who to speak and picking questioners and that kind of thing. I do think, in light of what happened in the spring 21, the fall 21 town meeting last December, that we should make sure, though, we have people identify themselves. I think we need to be very careful about out-of-towners speaking, although this is an open public forum. But, I don't want to get into a situation where people are clueless as to who's speaking and what and who they may represent. But we need to figure that part out, how we're diplomatically going to do that. So that's the game plan, and then again, we are meeting right after that, correct, on the 26th. And we will debrief and see how that format worked as we head into the second one, which will be on the topic of housing. That one we will have active participation of the Affordable Housing Committee. We've already asked them. I think the major focus of that is going to be multifamily and the impact of these MBTA regulations, but the discussion may get into single family development issues as well. There's nothing that we can't talk about that, but I think the focus of the presentation is going to be on the issue of multifamily, which this town has long talked about developing more multifamily. Now we need the MBTA regulations are sort of forcing us in a direction to do something. And then Woody is going to speak, as well as the Affordable Housing Committee, regarding our accessory dwelling bylaw, which has been on the books for 17 years. 20 years, and
20
it
years.
is. If it's utilized, it's certainly under the radar.
It's had one application in 20 years.
I mean, there are accessory dwellings in town, but there's one permitted accessory dwelling in town.
Right, so that, I won't editorialize, but that tells you that the ADU bylaw is not working.
So, and we, on the working group and in other forums, there's been discussions about some rather simple tweaks that could be done to it that might make it more palatable to people. Lawrence pointed out that there's a new model bylaw that perhaps one town in the Commonwealth has already adopted. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, that Arlington may have, but
And Norwell just passed an ADU.
yeah. So
bylaw.
I mean, we
And
have some
the
existing.
only thing that's wrong with our bylaw is that you can't make changes to the exterior. I mean,
No,
could be
I
improved
don't
from
want to
there.
debate it. I certainly disagree, but we can.
All right, well, you know what, this is what the forum will do, is that, we'll present different points of view on it. I'll put it on you, Woody, if you could take a look at what Norwell's done, if it's something new and recent.
Yeah,
And Lauren may be able to speak to the model bylaw if you don't also want to, you don't mind, Lauren, me putting that on you, but. And Jack's here. Welcome, Jack.
Lauren, just as an across table, did you get a copy of it's about a year and a half old now, my rewrite of the ADU, affordable dwelling unit?
I'll look through my records.
Well, if not, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Why don't you send me the model bylaw?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm making a note right now.
Great.
Now that's an example, Woody, where, feel free to throw that idea out there. And then, we can then contrast it with what the model bylaw is saying, what Norwell is doing.
You may not be very far off. Who knows?
The simple change, if you and Clark have different views on this, Clark can come in and offer an opinion on it. I don't expect much from the Affordable Housing Committee on that particular subject because they seem to have historically been disinterested in it. But they're going to speak to the housing plan, the town housing plan. Lauren, I don't know if it's you or me. I thought it was you that was going to summarize the MBTA regulations.
Yes, I can do that. I was planning to.
One of your, Jack and Jean, and I don't know if Diane's still out there, but one of your colleagues has recently brought to my attention, what if we didn't adopt these MBTA regulations? What's really the punishment to the town that could come to us? So, we might throw that into the mix in the discussion. But again, it'll be relatively short on presentation and more listening to the community about what they want to do. And then the third forum before the end of the year will be in early December. That's when we're going to start talking about environmental related potential changes, how we're going to deal with climate resiliency and climate change and what directions we might take there. There is a model bylaw out there about that. We on the working group in the last 2 years have really not discussed that in detail at all. So we don't have any ideas to throw out there. Clark is going to take the part of green development or so-called low impact development.
Yeah, sustainable design.
Sustainable development.
Yeah, the green is a sort of a unused term these days.
Yes, I think we have asked, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, Tom Bell from the Concom to speak to the resiliency part. We do have a floodplain protection bylaw that exists that may or may not change, that maybe, when we get closer to it, we need to compare it to the model climate change or resiliency bylaw, whatever they're calling it, and see what we have to do there. But that's going to be our environmental related. It could even branch out into, is the land alteration bylaw as compromised in the past working? Should we go back to what it was originally conceived? Blah, blah, blah. So everything environmental related would be at that one. And then down the road in the spring, at least one of the forums will probably be regarding the articles that would actually come forward to town meeting to sort of give a preview of them in a forum-like setting where there'd be a lot of feedback and opportunity to maybe tweak the actual proposals before we actually get to the floor of town meeting. We will also have the public, the required public hearing before the planning board for the zoning of the articles that are proposed. And we have to then have our review with the select board and the advisory committee. But we also thought about doing a forum, hopefully as large as town meeting, but not town meeting itself, to debate and tweak some of the proposals that'll actually be coming forward for the spring of 23, which will mostly be focused on reorganization as we presently are conceiving how we're going to present the changes to the bylaw.
So the content changes will be pushed off till the fall of 23.
The major content changes right now we're envisioning happening in the fall 23. It would all be done by fall 23, but we seem to be breaking this into two pieces. We've used the term low-hanging fruit for some substantive changes, and I think when we do reorganization, it's hard to avoid, I think, dealing with the use section and the definitions section, which, depending on how you look at it, could either be a reorganization or it's a substantive change. So, we'll have a good number of articles for the spring. And then beyond those four, whether we, after getting ready for Springtown meeting, if we identify another part of the bylaw or a specific topic like housing, like the Village Harbor, or something new comes to us, we will probably have another substantive, focused topic forums going forward, getting ready for the fall. And particularly if we're going to be making changes, for example, to the table of area regulations, I can guarantee that we would have a forum to discuss ideas about what changes to make there. So So anyway, that's the plan. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything about what it is we plan to do, but
I think Justin has his hand up. Yeah.
Justin, yes.
So real quickly, I do think we need to circle back before we get off on a tangent and talk a little bit about public outreach. I'm really focused on October 17th. For me, that is the goal in mind for the next 2 weeks. And Jean brought up a good point, and I was going to echo that, is when we do these interviews, and I've got several organizations that would like to speak to members of the DVC, is have your top 3 messages or top 3 themes that you want to communicate to these outlets. So we make sure that there's consistent messaging. So I think we need to go through that quickly if we've got a second. And then I'd like to discuss after that some public events that are coming up. I've got a large list of public events, some of which I've been to, but I think it would be good to have some members of the zoning bylaw committee attend 1 or 2 events in the next week and talk to folks a little bit about what they can expect on October 17th.
I'm already scheduled. This was before you even got involved. This was scheduled in the summer, and it was postponed from early September. But I'm scheduled to speak at some group at the library sometime in the next week or 2, I think. Like, it's on my calendar at my office.
Okay. That's good.
It got moved from September because of scheduling conflicts. But I mean, the most important message to first deliver is why we're doing this. And the consistent message there is that while we have zoning changes almost at every town meeting, we haven't really looked at the core substance of the bylaw in probably 36 years, 1986. And before that, it might have been as far back as 1969, but we did make a major change in 1969. And that's one. And from that comes not only changing times, changing development patterns, which leads us to maybe changing substance of the bylaw. As the introduction to our diagnostic points out, the bylaws become an organizational mess over the years with all the things that have been grafted onto it. So part of it is housekeeping, part of it is that it's just beyond the time for us to be reviewing the substance of this.
That's great, and I think we ought to.
That's the core
speak
message,
to folks. Why does this matter to folks? And I think we really need to communicate that. Why should people show up? Why should they take 2-3 hours out of their night on October 17th and show up? And I think that's also a key issue that members need to communicate in the content.
Are these all Zoom meetings?
They're going to be live, Zoom, and television simultaneously.
Okay, all right.
And then I presume 143 will repeat them on TV for the next few weeks afterwards, which I hope they do. So we're using the senior center, that big meeting room, and I've been told you can get as many as 100 people when you move the movable walls and everything. So we'll see how many people show up. But yes, Jean.
So for the first meeting, and I think this is maybe where what Justin is trying to figure out is, are there like 4 sound bites about the harbor and the village that you would recommend we use to spur interest in the forum? Like, what do you think about condos around the harbor, including at the end of Parker Ave? Does height matter in the harbor, particularly if we need to raise buildings because of flood elevations? Should we give more teeth to character and design guidelines in the village when looking at projects? Should require more distance between residential neighborhoods and village buildings, particularly for taller ones. Like, if those 4 are really sort of the key of what's being considered, then we can consistently message that,
Yes,
throughout, I can do it, you can, everyone can do
You
it.
pretty much hit those on the head, and I'll leave it to Justin to come up with those and reduce to bullet points and everything. But and maybe reminding people that redevelopment in both these areas is already happening, and there's people who already are developing strong opinions one way or the other about that. And the future of the development in both these areas is now on the table. And, I mean, in the harbor, to a certain extent, since there's just so few properties actually on the waterfront, the horse is almost out of the barn. I mean, the wharf's being redeveloped. We're soon going to see the redevelopment of the Lobster Pound property.
Well, you know, that I think parking in both the village and the harbor is a major issue.
Yeah.
In the village, it's a non-zoning but practical limitation. I mean, the parking lot is full at 9 or 10 in the morning, and people can't use the village or won't be able to.
No, it's good that you brought that up.
In the harbor, a strict application of the zoning bylaw says that Lobster Pound area cannot be developed. And in fact, there can be no more further commercial development in the harbor, the way I read the bylaw. Absent a variance, which is, well, just for sake of argument, say is impossible.
Yeah.
To grant.
I
I
didn't.
think the town has to address parking in both these.
Yeah,
areas.
parking would be another bullet. And I was remiss at not mentioning it before that it's going to be a topic at the first forum, and it's one of those ones that overlaps both of them. But
Hey, Tom, maybe we could get the committee that's studying the parking along the harbor to dovetail in their findings. I don't know if they've presented anything to the selectmen yet, but
yeah,
it wouldn't hurt as a part of the harbor discussion to see what the latest critical thinking of the evolution of parking facilities at the harbor might be.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're going to be there. I'm sure that they can certainly have the opportunity to speak as they're not an official town committee. I'm a little reluctant to formally invite them to present.
Well,
But
if nobody's seen their stuff, it certainly would be something that
oh yeah, no,
could spur.
I think Clark is absolutely right. You don't want parallel or conflicting messages sent out there by another group, whether it's officially chartered or not. I think we've all got to, you know, we may not all agree, but we've got to be kind of on the same page. At least.
I don't have a problem with that. But what I was going to say too is parking to me is not so much a zoning problem as it is a space problem. Where are you going to put it? You know, we can tweak how many spaces you need per commercial space. We could, you know, the village developments get the benefit of being able to use the public's parking lot towards their space counts. The harbor doesn't. Do we do the same in both places? But I don't know, or do we end it in the village? Those are the zoning issues, but really it's space. Where are you going to put more parking? And that's not really a zoning problem per se, but yeah, we can certainly talk about it. I don't know what this private group's agenda is or their findings. I mean, they're certainly welcome to speak, but I'm not.
Well,
so
it's a committee. I don't think it's a private group, but it's just a committee that's interested in studying the problems there. And Lauren knows more about it than I do.
Actually, it's not a committee. It is just a private residence group.
Oh, okay.
And then it led me to think earlier today, you know, I got an email last week about whatever group is trying to pass a bylaw, which would not be a zoning bylaw, about the use of the harbor and navigation in the harbor. I don't know if that will come up, but if it does come up, I think we just remark that it's not a zoning issue per se, because you don't zone the water.
Right.
But that may or may not come up. David, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just going to say, one of the things that you have is whenever we have a zoning bylaw or change is we're always fighting the last war, and it ends up being in reaction to something is whatever the new change in the zoning bylaw is, and then it gets cobbled together. While certainly I want to hear from abutters and people who live in the harbor and whatever, but we don't want to have it just be a complaint session for maybe a couple of the projects that are happening, but we do want to hear from everybody as you know, for the future of the places that aren't being developed. There is potential future development in some of the ones that haven't been developed in the harbor. So some of the findings that we get could help in changing potentially what we look to do in the future. But I think we got to think of also what, you know, the long view of that. When you get a zoning bylaw, you're looking at you know, the long view of this is going to be here most likely for years, minus any amendments. And also, it's going to hopefully, submit the changes that everyone's looking for as far as the uses. So I think the uses will probably be the biggest things of what people are looking for and not looking for. But that could be something that they could message is what kind of uses are they looking for in the harbor regarding it. So
Woody, you and I would, need to be in command of the uses that are allowed in waterfront business today so that we can talk to people about it. As far as this being just a bitch session, I don't want it to be that either. Perhaps when we explain to people how the forum's going to run and there'll be a Q&A that, we suggest to people, please use this as an opportunity to give us some solutions, not just complaints about things. I don't know how we message that, but
yeah, it's good to know what's working and what's not working to a point. But one of the things also is we haven't had where the hotel was, and now of course it's going to be condos. That hasn't been around for many years. Atlantica, even though they've got the project to redo that hasn't been a restaurant now for how many years? So I mean, the uses in there are going to get a lot more intensive once they get built or rebuilt. And I don't think that people are know what that's going to look like. They might have fears about it. They might have other thoughts about it, but nobody knows really what the traffic's really going to be when everything is said and done out there, or what have you. We do know there is a shortage of parking, no matter how you want to slice it. But it's going from a place where it hasn't been used. Both sites haven't been used for many years, and now there's going to be intensive use on top of what we had. Now, many of us can remember what the intensive use was before, when you had Kimball's operating and you had Atlantica or Hugo's or whatever, or Chart House. We can remember what it was when they did weddings of 300 and 400 people there, and the cars were all lined down Elm Street practically to the police station. I mean, for those of us who've been around, we know what that's like. But again, it's been kind of dormant there, so I don't know if people know what the intensity is going to be once these things are built.
I like to give people the example, although it's different because it's Situate's sole commercial district, but the comparison of Situate Harbor before its redevelopment and what it is today, I think is a good one to give. During the course of the hotel projects, there was Marina Bay was brought up, but I don't think Marina Bay compares to Cohasset. I think we're closer to Situate. And in my own personal view, knowing what Front Street used to be like, and Front Street has some retail vacancies, but it's vibrant because A, people live there, and B, they've got a lot of restaurants and a fairly vibrant hospitality industry down there. And I think that's what we're looking at probably as a practical matter for Cohasset. The question is, do we expand residences on the harbor that much? In the village, we're doing that. We encouraged that 17 years ago with the changes to encourage residences in the village, but that'll be the big question for the harbor. But it's Situate is busy. There's traffic all the time. Sometimes they have a big parking lot, but sometimes it's tough parking in Situate. You certainly can't get spaces. They don't even have on-street spaces for the most part. But I think that's going to be the example that maybe is the closest for us to point to from around this area. But
well, Tom, you and I know that I probably see things a little differently than some members of the committee, in that I think the Oaks is fair game for development. I think the Bellarmine within 10 years will be developed. BC is not going to continue to own that property. And if you think the harbor's busy now, just wait a few years. I truly believe. I mean, clearly the Oaks, the best use of the Oaks property is not as a $15 or $20 million mansion. Maybe it is, but
when we talk about the redistricting, and I was talking about all the waterfront properties, and I envision that going to the yacht club, because the yacht, a yacht club use would be an allowed use in the waterfront business district, and to the extent it's grandfathered today, it would be made as a right use. But I think we need to seriously discuss the Oaks and the Bellarmine property. They're Residence C. They just simply can't be chopped up into multifamily without. I don't know if they can be at all under our current zoning and Residence C, but I think those are fair game to talk about, what do we do with those? I don't even, by the way, maybe you know, how the hell did the Oaks become a commercial building?
Well, it did, as you know, about 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Yankee Oil and Gas owned that.
Yeah, how did that happen under the zoning?
Constructive grant. He's dead. Bob Booth failed to file the decision.
Okay.
But
You know, so those are two
stuff happens.
residents, yeah, those are two residency properties that, because of their size of the buildings on them, yeah, they're not super practical as single family homes, but what else would we want to see there? That's, I think, and that may come up as questions. But I will tell you that the working group never discussed rezoning those two properties. We discussed what might happen there, but we never discussed rezoning. per se.
Well, as I recall, for Bellamere, we determined that it was Bellarmine, it was a single family minimum lot size, and we were looking at maximum 4 or 5 homes there, and we decided, you know, we can live with that. But I want to back up a little bit. Conceptually, when we look at the harbor, I think we ought to be asking, what is it that the citizens really want to see in their community? And I think this is a small village. I think people choose Cohasset over other places because it's a small village. And I don't see that necessarily people want the harbor densely developed. And I don't think people really want wall-to-wall restaurants. I think people really kind of like a sleepy village. And when I talk to people around town, they say almost invariably, this is a special place like no place else. And we want to keep it that way. So maybe we should be thinking that our zoning should reflect the will of the people who chose to live here and continue to live here and the kind of community they want. I mean, after all, isn't that the fundamental purpose of zoning?
Well, as we get into the discussion of, I like the idea of framing a question to the people in all of these forums on the given topic. What is it that you want? Now that will give us a lot of open-ended stuff that isn't zoning related, isn't practical to implement through zoning. But I think that's a good question to put to people. But you know, I'm guessing that while the working group didn't discuss different uses to a large extent, I think if we open that up to people, we'll get a much more vibrant discussion than we were probably anticipating on the uses. But,
You know, I will say in response to Jack's comment, I hear what you're saying. I think that you're onto something. And to some extent, zoning and the expansion of sewer in Cohasset it's been a sleepy, drawn out transformation over decades. And we all knew that the little harbor was going to get sewered at some point, and we had time to change zoning to accommodate that. I think, you know, there has been sort of intense development around Little Harbor or because of the sewer, but you know, there's really no reason not to look at the parcels that are activated at whether we want to change the zoning or not. I mean, I think you're advocating for, to some extent, you know, you could do an overlay district one, you know, area at a time, not necessarily the whole harbor. As I think Tom has been kind of thinking about like a consolidation of zoning districts, but you know, I think there's a lot of options to go slow and steady and make sure that what's possible fits the aspirational vision for all of our constituents, I guess, as elected folks would call it.
one of the things, Clark, you bring up is that early on in the working group, I had thrown out an idea that I originally pitched to the Harbor Committee when it was reconstituted in like 2014, was the idea of having a master harbor district, but then sub-districts. And it's not common in Massachusetts zoning, but it's theoretically possible in Massachusetts zoning. And you'd go around to different locations in the harbor, and you might call one harbor open space, harbor mixed use, harbor commercial. I'm thinking what the initials that I used, and each one would have sort of targeted uses given the area. One was harbor recreational, so the yacht club and the sailing club would just be, and they'd be zoned for strictly recreational uses. Their particular existing uses would become as of right rather than grandfathered. And, but going forward, they would be limited to those uses, and we did more targeted zoning in the harbor. And I remember that we did discuss it in the working group, and we said, nah, it's too complicated. Let's just go with the one overriding either harbor or waterfront business, whatever we want to call it. But that's another approach. I think, you know, we didn't run it by council at the time, and we haven't run it by council yet here, but, you know, we could do very targeted zoning. And it's, you know, as far as the issue of spot zoning, it's only spot zoning if somebody doesn't like it. If somebody doesn't like the spot they're being put in, then it becomes objectionable. But you can target zoning into different little sub areas. Boston does, I mean, big cities do this, but you know, that's another thought, you know. But Jack, you know, if you say get rid of restaurants, that's a big change. Restaurants are allowed all over the harbor, correct, Woody?
Oh, I
believe
didn't
they
say
could-
get rid of restaurants. We have restaurants. My point is that people who want to add to it or want to have a quote vibrant harbor should realize that when we had all of that, we were able to accommodate it. But we've had a little bit of a change, but we should be careful of what we wish for, and we should listen to what, if you ask people in Cohasset, they kind of like Cohasset as a small, relatively sleepy village. So we're dealing with a very small geographical area. There really isn't much. We can't even really have a proper parking along, you know, along the harbor. We have two large parcels. We don't know what's going to happen with either, but they're one of them is zoned residential, and we when we looked at it last 2 years ago, I guess it was, we concluded that the zoning allows large lots, single family, and if that's what happens, that's probably not such a bad thing to have for the overall to maintain the scenic values and of the harbor. And the harbor will not really handle a lot more congestion and traffic well than we end up go down to Hyannis sometime and try to get to one of the ferries over there. It's a wall-to-wall traffic jam pretty much all summer long. And I don't think people in Cohasset want that. They want that. There's places they could live. They've chosen Cohasset because we can really drive down to the sailing club. We can drive down to the harbor, and we can pretty much always find a place to park. It may be tight at times, and there's a definitely quality of life. And my understanding is zoning is a community's attempt to control their quality of life as far as the physical. So I'm just saying that we should always keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I don't know that we'll ever be quite like Hyannis, but it's a good analogy to make. But yeah, you bring up an interesting topic as we go forward with all of this, the whole thing, is that, yes, you hear that, you see on social media the sentiment that, oh, Cohasset's changing for the worse. It's not the old Cohasset I knew. I don't know that we should let people believe that they can stop development and progress. I've always said that the Zoning Act in Massachusetts is not to stop development or control development, it's to condition development. We get into restricting certain people's uses, there will be those who will start saying, oh, you've done a regular taking, you've taken, now that's difficult for them to win on in Massachusetts, but you're going to start seeing that. And, you know, the town has progressed in population fairly steadily since World War II. We can show the working group developed data as to how much it's grown since the year 2000, both in the number of average house size as well as population. We are in a spike period for both of those. But I don't know that we can lead people to believe that we can keep Cohasset being what they romantically think it was 40, 50 years ago.
No, that's not the point.
Well, I don't want to necessarily convey that message. I want people to be realistic about.
But
Well,
there's a balance between, you know, permissive development or expansionism and retraction or trying to slow down as much development as possible. I think there's a balance and there's pros and cons to kind of either approach. And I really think that from a zoning perspective, we want to try and strike the balance between too much and too little
that's
for
what
the
conditional.
future of Cohasset.
I agree, and that's when Tom said conditional, we condition development, and we condition development to the conditions that the community is looking for. You don't stop development, and most development in Cohasset is actually redevelopment, repurposing.
Right.
We just think about how it fits in, and so it's not kind of a willy-nilly, whoever has a great idea can get it slipped through quickly. It's thoughtful, and we control our destiny.
Yeah,
As
I don't disagree. I just don't want to overindulge the
No, of course not.
the romanticists in town that will come out of it and speak. So
No, I think you want
All
the
right,
the zoning bylaw to complement, enhance, and be congruent with the town character. I mean, that's what you're
Sure.
looking for. And I think there's a balance of that.
but like I said, we will have data of the growth since 2000 that might shock some people in town.
But I also think, I mean, David's right. I mean, you're all right, as far as I'm concerned, but I think we've got to, and maybe these are straw men and women, but we've got to put some ideas on the table to really ascertain, is this unacceptable, or would it be acceptable to the citizens with conditions or not, rather than just say we won't make any changes, or somehow we're going to freeze time. That I think is a recipe for disaster. Far better to say, is there a certain kind of smart development that is acceptable, limited, but acceptable? I don't know. I honestly don't know where people come out. I know some of the more vocal people and where they stand, but I don't know where the other 3,000 or 4,000 people are.
That's always the
I
difficulty.
mean, I just think
It's always the difficulty in town of
I know. I'd rather, as you guys go forward, posit, this could happen, or we could do this or not. Is there any way to make that acceptable, or is that totally against the character of the town? In which case, it's obviously a no-go. But I don't know.
And I think as we particularly get into later on, when we get into the dimensional table, I think it's going to be incumbent on us to show examples of what development would be under the current scenario, what would happen if we did this change, what would happen if we did that change. It was, specifically, we talk about issues of frontage and lot width and that kind of thing. There's going to be some definite changes that we could show people, keeping it this way and going in a different direction. But yeah, we should keep that in mind as we go through all of this. All right, we've been going an hour. Unless anybody else has anything to add about how we do the forums, like I said, the first one is going to be the test case. Justin, you're going to go to town on your promotion. We'll appreciate everything you're doing, and we'll see what kind of turnout. Hopefully, the community will take an interest in this.
Mr. Chair, real quick, I would like to just throw out a couple of events coming up real fast. October 6th is the farmers market here in town. I am looking for 2 volunteers to come out to the farmers market to talk to folks about the first public forum on October 17th. I'd also like some folks to come out, not this weekend, but next Saturday to talk to some parents. We'll be out at Cohasset Youth Soccer, playing some soccer games out there. I'd love to get more folks interested in this. And so those are some ways that we can get out there. I've cleared it with Cohasset Youth Soccer. They are happy, and they are happy that there are hopefully some volunteers that will come out there next Saturday. So I'd love to get this out in some grassroots promotion.
I'm going to be at soccer on Saturday anyway.
Great.
Well, let
So
me
if I have
ask you.
something to hand out. I mean, there's
I've
always
got
sort of like
flyers.
downtime. Hey, your kid did a good kick. Wow. You know, if you can talk, can I talk to you about zoning?
But
Well,
I'll tell you,
No.
I spoke to folks about zoning I was at the open house for the fire department the other day, and I spoke to some folks about zoning. And I spoke to some folks a little bit
Gee,
about
you must have been
this forum.
popular.
But it's imperative that we get out there and we try to get, I really want to get as many people as possible and get as a diverse crowd as possible. So those are a couple of events that I'd like some volunteers for.
Hey,
If
Justin,
we
I'll
can
tell
do
you.
that.
one
I
more
can't do the
idea.
I can't do the farmer's market during the week, but
Okay.
on this weekend thing, it's like, I don't know what you, Lauren and Cassandra, did at the farmer's market. And are you like having us stand there and people can come to us if they want to ask questions, or are we getting up? Because I am not comfortable getting up into people's faces and saying, hey, are you interested in zoning?
No, so
I have no
Lauren
problem
Cassandra
getting up
actually
in
just had
front
a
of the
table.
forum and speaking to 100 people,
Lauren-
but I can't go up to
Lauren
one
did
person
that,
at a soccer. Yeah, well, I can't do
a
it.
couple of weeks ago.
I'm not good at that stuff. I'm not good at that kind of one-on-one. I can get up in front of 100 people, but not one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Lauren and Cassandra had a table out there, and they were just talking to folks as they came up to
Oh,
them.
all right. Well, I can do a
so
table
forth.
on the weekend. As long as I'm not getting in somebody's face, I can do the table on a weekend.
Okay.
If you have a table and a banner, and something to hand people, that's
we
probably
do.
good. One thing we always forget about before our forums is the town, the street signs where they're announcing, you can drop off your brush this weekend and next weekend at the dump. If it's possible for the week ahead of the forum to have a sign out on 3A and one maybe in the village or North Main Street to announce that would be great.
The one
Yes.
going to the recycling center, when
Yep,
they put
yep.
that's really the one that people see.
Yep, I am one step ahead of both of
Dynamite.
you on
See?
that. Yes.
That's why we hired you.
Well,
Good job.
Also, Justin, could you share, if you have a flyer, and flyer says more than, we have a meeting on the 17th, would you be able to share it with all of us? I mean, I'd like to kind of look at some of the material to be sure I'm sort of on track with things I can talk about and things I shouldn't talk about, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, something that can be emailed around to people too.
Absolutely.
As a
And I
reminder.
will say, other boards and committees, just because I've been jumping in on them, have also been discussing, as asked, have been discussing the upcoming public meeting on the 17th. I sent that an email to every chair, asking them to discuss it either at their beginning of their meeting or at the end of their meeting, to let folks know what's happening.
Good. All right. If we're done with this topic, I don't want to keep us here all night. So I want to move on to the other main agenda item, which is KP's diagnostic. Now, I know they couldn't be here tonight. I know that they want to have some meeting with the select board. I've kind of emphasized that even though we've moved everything to spring and fall 23 town meetings, we still have a fairly tight schedule to keep to get bylaw changes before those two town meetings. So I want to start with our own discussion tonight about this. The members of the committee seen it and had a chance to read it yet?
Yes, yeah.
I haven't seen it.
All right, well, Cassandra had distributed the other day.
It's
I
a
don't know that-
mouthful.
I don't know that, yeah, it's Woody, it's 34 pages.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if you've seen it, but I
I've gone
don't
through
have,
it, but
I don't have a problem sharing it with people off the committee who haven't seen it yet, but
There's a lot there. I mean, just.
Yeah,
a lot to absorb.
so, I mean, I have some issues with it, particularly the organizational recommendation at the end. Still having 20 articles, I think is not where the direction we should go in, but that, we'll work out the text later, but I do think it is, very thorough in going through each article and all of their problems, and may have brought to our attention some we hadn't thought of, but in large part, we all know this bylaw is a mess, and it's just pointed that out, and it's good that somebody has gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and pointed out all of it, where up until this point, various members of the committees have, been aware of certain issues that are more problematic than others. But so this is a great working start to it. And, I'll tell everybody that I want to have a meeting with council and with the town manager and Lauren to discuss some things going forward here. Just about the mechanics of working with this, but this is a great tool for us, and very necessary tool that we have this kind of analysis, and we can debate the recommendations as we go forward. But in keeping with our schedule, I'll open the floor in a second to anybody else who has thoughts about the diagnostic as a whole. But in keeping to our schedule, if town meeting in 23 is in May, we still have to be prepared with written articles by probably early mid-February at the latest. So we have to keep on track to start discussing these things. So at our next meeting, which is going to be what's the night of the next one? The 12th, Wednesday, the 12th. In addition to doing any final preparations for the forum, I want to start getting into the meat of the bylaw and these changes. So if everybody could make sure they look over this diagnostic and then be prepared, we'll start at the beginning with the reorganizational, the articles dealing with reorganization. We'll get into what KP is proposing as Article 1, what I'm proposing as Article 1. What they're proposing is Article 10, which is our administration, and which is our current Article 12, which under my proposal all goes into one article. And let's get into the debate of it. So look at, if you could, for the next meeting, existing Articles 1 and 12 of the bylaw, the proposed changes that KP has here under Article 1 and Article 12. And then please look at my proposed new Article 1, which is a combination of 1 and 12, which KP is not proposing combining them, but we'll debate the organizational semantics. I thought we had come to a consensus on the organization, but that's my one issue with this, is the end recommendation for 20 articles, but we'll get over that stuff. But let's start digging into the substance for that by looking at the 1 and 12. After that, I think we'll tackle the definitions. That might take 1 or 2 meetings to tackle all the definitions, but we'll try to take these articles in order, with the focus on getting ready for reorganizational articles for Springtown meeting. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments about the diagnostic itself? Any surprises that was revealed to you, or anything that you'd like to offer? You have the floor. Justin.
Real quickly, I have to jump off and head to another meeting. Woody, I will get that sent out to you tomorrow morning so you have it. Everybody else, I'll send it to everybody for flyers and whatnot. And then I'll touch base with some of you this week so we can continue our promotional and marketing campaign. Like I said, I've got some media who really wants to sit down with some of you. So
yeah, and then I want to just nail down with you some of the slides and, you know, the visuals that we'll have at the forum itself. I have some thoughts about that. I actually developed a few, but all right. Thank you, Justin. Really
I
appreciate
think
it.
I'll log off because I'm not a member of your group.
No, but if
yeah.
you've actually read the diagnostic, Woody, I would respect your opinion if you have any about what it.
My opinion is that there's a lot there. It's really excellent work, I've got to say, and I've got a kind of a question for Lauren. You may not be able to answer it, but is KP Law more or less following some sort of model organization? I mean, I know bylaws are all over the lot because I've looked at about 30 different towns over the last few years. So there isn't a standard order, but there may be emerging some sort of consensus or best practices or something. I don't know.
Right, I know, and I think my opinion is just that I imagine the same, because I know that Judge Cutler has been involved in many a zoning diagnostic and rewrite, and I think that they do have a typical sort of like best practice approach or framework that they do recommend in terms of what every single bylaw's contents are.
And so, Tom, I don't want you to be offended, but my first instinct is to lean heavily on their organization, because it probably follows, as Lauren said, or I said, a best practice model or something, but
Well,
it can't be tailored to Cohasset, but
well, my only thought about that is when I first met with them and told them that the organizational model that cut down to originally 10 and now 9 articles was from Concord. And they said, wow. And I think it's because Judge Cutler might live in Concord.
I think she does.
And Concord is 10 articles. And I just took those
you have two factors. You have articles and then you have length of. And
yeah,
10 articles doesn't mean it's
no, I know. I just I'm not. I mean, again, the format and the article, how many articles there are in the end of the day doesn't matter. It's the substance that matters. But for example, I don't see why articles 1 and 12 logically should be separated. But you know, administration stuff should be in one place, not all. You know, and administration stuff shouldn't be at the end. It should be at the beginning. But that's philosophical stuff about how you organize a document and an organizational document for something. But again, that's minor league stuff compared to the actual substance.
Yeah, Tom, I had a quick question. Is while we have Woody here, how did you plan to, or how do we plan to get the zoning board not necessarily involved, but to look at maybe this at KP Law done? Because if we go through it and we start to say, okay, well, this change looks okay, and it looks like nothing, there could be some institutional knowledge that the zoning board might say, well, we've had 5 cases on that, and they're you know, this could send us in a direction that we don't know. So is there any way we could get either Woody or the zoning board to kind of peruse it as well?
If we had an agreed upon line of march, I mean, order to things, then the zoning board would be willing, I'm just speaking, I'm imagining, would be willing to dig deeply. One of the things we always look for and are you know, kind of annoyed about our forebears is that there are embedded throughout our bylaws a lot of either inconsistencies, outright conflicts, or vagueness that, you know, you wish like hell there was a definition of something rather than going blind. And that's the kind of things that we would spend more time on. Are there, I mean, could this bylaw, however, be administered well and fairly and clearly, or are we kind of making things up on the fly? More so than which section comes before another. I mean, if it's in there, I'm happy.
Well, so, you know, the working group had Woody as a member, and, you know, it would be, in a perfect world, this new committee would have a zoning board member. We don't, but, you know, Woody and I have spoken offline about continuing to, you know, solicit his input and the value of his experience. So I don't expect that not to happen. We've already talked about the non-conforming uses structures article, to the extent any changes are needed in that. And certainly we've discussed single lot exemption quite a bit, but you know, essentially for this committee to farm that out to the to the zoning board because it's their purview and they know it backwards and forwards and what
Right,
the
but we
problems
would be, as I say, you'll probably find the zoning board as a group or as individuals dealing more with the concept of, can we administer this fairly? Is there conflict or large voids? Then should height be 40 feet, 35 or 25 feet? I don't think we'll dive that deeply into the specific, but is it, where doesn't that apply? What are the exceptions to the rule? That kind of thing that we'll spend more time on. I would say I was impressed that KP Law did a lot of cross-referencing to Chapter 40A, made mention many times of this is already covered, or you cover this, but you're not consistent with 40A.
Right.
Abandonment, I think, is one area they cited. So
Right.
A lot of this is useful. But I defer to them.
All right, well, I think as far as the zoning board going forward, and and the same with the planning board, Clark and I, we didn't do it last week. We had a long meeting, but we give our updates and we will be seeking the opinions of our board where it's necessary. And I think, Woody hasn't told me there's not an open door to go into the zoning board and say, hey, look at this that we're talking about. And this is the change we're proposing with KP. What do you think? I hope that'll be the case with all the boards, because I don't want to get to our section 40, section 5 hearings. That's the formal hearing before the planning board, before town meeting. I don't want to get blindsided by anybody.
Right. No, I'll get the zoning board to dig deep, but as I say, I don't think, and the reason you don't have a zoning board member is that there's less interest in the order of presentation in the zoning, and much more interest in the detailed content and can these be administered. So
Okay, that's good.
That's why we don't have a zoning board.
And I think
We'll
on
all
our
step
board,
up. We'll all
in
step
our
up.
board, as we go forward, Dave, if you find something, it would be great to hear from the zoning board on this. Just shout that out. And that's for any board that we think might have some relevant input on a particular section of the bylaw. And I would hope we're going to get cooperation up and down the line as we go forward. Clark, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. But talk about being blindsided. I did check in with the town clerk about the logistics for having the E-Code 360 do an organizational update for Springtown meeting, and then all the other changes. And she said that they have to have budget and do a proposal for what's being discussed for changes, as opposed to just changing and updating one section, one or two sections, or a paragraph here or there, which has been the last couple. So that's something to talk about in terms of like how much we're talking about and how long it takes from the time we pass the bylaw and then the AG approves it to when it's actually up and running in E-Code 360. And I know I had mentioned we may have to have a transition PDF that's available for some period of time. But it would be, I think, wise to find out what the logistics are to get to the end goal, which is a new bylaw up and running and available through our E-Code 360 service provider.
Yeah, my view on that is we're not bound to E360, and we can go back to the old-fashioned way of having a Word or PDF.
Well, wait a minute. The clerk made a commitment to that system.
Well,
I
that's
agree
fine,
with
but-
you. I kind of like the ability to change our stuff. I frankly resented the fact that it got changed and the clerk at the time didn't ask anybody. But that there's a good and a bad side to everything in life. So if that is being considered, we should consider that along with.
No, I hear what you're saying. My point is only that the enforceability and usability of a new bylaw isn't dependent on it being in the 360 system, as long as it's in an accessible written format.
Yes and no.
All right, but I hear what you're saying. So
we have a system. The clerk liked it.
I know.
Could we
that's fine.
change it? Yes. There's logistics involved, and I'm suggesting that we go through the logistics
All right, perfect. I
as
agree. So,
thoroughly as we can, as early as possible, so we're not surprised that oh, hey, we have to create a whole new bylaw to
okay.
to post online.
We're sitting here in October of 22, and maybe Laura and Cassandra, you can talk to the clerk. Let's start planning for it. Let's tell them, let's be very upfront with them that we're going to be doing, 12, perhaps 12 articles at each town meeting, multiple articles with perhaps half the text of the bylaw being changed at each town meeting.
Yep.
Get the cost estimates, whatever, and the time estimates of how quickly they can do it. But again,
Tom,
just because
I'll forward the email I got from the clerk
Okay.
a couple of weeks ago.
I get what you're saying.
I
but
think it's
also-
going to be important to continue a dialogue on these logistics.
Understood. All I'm saying is
Not that I like logistics. I'm, the logistics I
No,
think
I'm a
somebody else can
logistics
take
guy.
care of, but it is a big issue.
okay, no, I agree. And I'm a logistics guy, but
It's
again, I'm
the
just worried
wonders
about.
of technology that the bylaw is going to move faster than the technology. That's
Well,
Yeah, I
It's gonna
know.
be a first.
I know, shocker, right?
Yeah, the important thing is that the changes are in effect when the AG approves them in whatever written form they happen to be in at that given date. But again, I agree it should get to 360 as soon as possible. And we can start preparing for that months in advance right now by getting the cost estimates, giving them the worst case scenario of how much text it would be at each go round and get them ready for it. So that's a good point. Anybody else?
Am I allowed to leave?
If you'd
No.
like, Woody, I
I've
appreciate,
tried to be good. I've tried to behave.
Woody, I appreciate everything you do and then your participation in this. You don't
Okay,
know how
well,
much I
you
appreciate
can count on the ZBA, and I'll just make sure that we are all participating when it really matters and not to
Okay,
blindside you.
All right,
Right.
great.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Woody, I would really like to thank you very much.
Your face looks weird.
Well, it's always fun to see you, Jack.
All right.
What the
thank
hell?
you.
With that, good night.
All right, good night,
Right.
Woody.
Right, Woody?
And Lauren and Cassandra, please chime in as well if there's anybody else with additional thoughts about the diagnostic.
I think we're just gonna have to,
We're gonna have to
get
start
into,
plowing it.
we're gonna have to just start getting into it. And then while I've read it all, I mean, we're gonna have to look at each portion, then think about it and say, okay, what's this change going to do? What do we think it's going to do? And then kind of just go through them. And then hopefully some are going to be more on the housekeeping end that are great. It's a definitional change with no big impact, content wise, and then just go through them and see how we can,
Yeah.
we're just gonna have to chew it one bite at a time, I think, with that, because there's a lot there. And
Yeah.
then to the bigger points of organization, that's administration wise, that's more than.
Yeah, again, that's the substance is more important. I just have my personal pet peeve at the moment, and that's my gut reaction, and I get over my gut reactions eventually, but we will see.
Doesn't it make sense to review it as a committee? Maybe after the forum?
Well, all right. I mean, at the meeting on the 12th, since it's key to the reorganization part of the bylaw, we need to settle the issue. Are we going to have 20 articles, 9-ish articles, some number in between? We should settle that. All right. But then we need to start getting into the substance of the article.
So
As I
my question
envisioned
is,
it,
should we
as I-
review the diagnostic by KP together as a committee? Not tonight, but at some
Well,
future
yeah.
meeting after the 17th.
but we're going to have to do it article by article. It's just, we're not going
Okay.
to, we'll never get through 34 pages in one, So,
Okay.
but just to envision
Well, if we have a date where we're gonna all chew on it together,
well, I
then,
just suggested on the 17th, we're going to chew on existing articles 1 and 12.
the 17th is our forum.
No, I mean the 12th, the meeting of the 12th. the meeting on the 12th, we are going to first do the final run through of any issues
Yeah,
we have
that
regarding
makes
the
sense.
forum. And then the lion's share of the meeting will be to start to get into the meat of the bylaw with existing articles 1 and 12.
But doesn't it make sense to review the diagnostic report?
But you should all read the diagnostics comments on articles 1 and 12 before that meeting. And in a perfect world, you will read my proposed article 1.
I've read that already.
Those
Haven't
are
read
the
the diagnostic.
because those are all the suggested changes that are on the table at the moment.
Okay,
If anybody else has any suggested changes, fine, but in terms of the reorganization for the Springtown meeting, I've always envisioned this, that it would be the administrative stuff, the districts, the definitions, and the uses. I don't think we can reorganize without dealing with definitions and uses. And then all the other articles, dimensions, parking, everything else is the substantive stuff that will come in the fall. And so between now and February, we basically need to get through existing articles 1 through 4. And whatever changes we're going to make to them, that is what would be coming forward to town meeting.
Well done.
And with that would be the changes that we are proposing to move stuff out into regulations and into the article organizational format, whether it's 20 articles, 9 articles, 15 articles, whatever it's going to be. That's what would be coming forward to the town meeting in the spring. The meaty substantive changes that we want to do to parking signs, photovoltaic cells, dimensions, that's all in the fall. All right. Does that make sense? That makes sense. I think it makes sense.
sounds good.
I think it's well thought out.
But now we're, I mean, no disrespect to anything, but for 2 years, we've talked about a lot of things in the grand macro scale. Now we're going to get into the meat of actually rewriting text of the bylaw. We're going to start on the 12th and keep making headway while running 3 forums this winter, this fall, and other things that may come up. So if no one else has anything else to discuss about the diagnostic, we have minutes of a meeting of September 12th to pass. I don't know if anybody's seen them, but I usually write them while they're fresh in my mind right after these meetings. Tonight's are not going to be elaborate, I can assure you, but they'll be out within a few minutes. But can I take a motion on passing the minutes or approving the minutes of September 12th?
Motion to approve.
A second, please.
Seconded.
Thank you. Roll call. Clark?
Clark Brewer, aye.
David
Tom
Frog, aye.
Callaghan? Well, we go in alphabetical order in my world. I'm sorry. Your last, Dave. Jack?
Jack Creighton, aye.
David, okay, thank you, 4-0. All right, so again, we will see you next Wednesday on the 12th, and then the 4 on the 17th, and then the 26th will be, the 26th, just to look ahead, will be our debriefing on the forum, which will probably take up an hour of our time, maybe longer. And to the extent we can move forward on some articles, we will do so.
Very good.
All right. Thank
Great.
you all.
Thanks, Tom.
Lauren,
Thanks, guys.
Lauren, Cassandra, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, thank you.
Bye.